My name is Mariam Al-Farsi. I am 32 years old and I live in Houston, Texas, a bustling city full of life where the sound of cars mingles with the call of routine. I am a science teacher at an elementary school, a job that feels more like a mission. Teaching children, seeing the sparkle in their eyes when they understand something for the first time, that is what drives me. Every innocent question, every discovery, reminds me why I chose this profession. I pride myself on being that figure of trust and support for my students, someone who, in addition to teaching formulas and phenomena, offers listening, understanding, and encouragement. I am married to Ahmed, my life partner, and my heart. He is a calm, soft-spoken man with a steady gaze, who has built his own small business with dedication and effort. Together, we raise our 2 children, Layla, who is 8 years old and already shows an infectious curiosity about the world, and Adam, our youngest of 5, who has the sweetness and energy that only children can carry. At first glance, my life may seem simple, an ordinary family, a predictable routine, but within that simplicity lies an immense richness. There is love, faith, and a deep sense of purpose. I was born right here in the United States to Muslim parents who left Egypt in search of a safer, more stable life. They brought with them more than just suitcases. They brought with them values, stories, traditions, and a faith that has never wavered. From an early age, I grew up surrounded by the soft sound of Quran recitations echoing through the house, the aroma of strong coffee in the morning, and the warmth of a community that, even far from their homeland, remained united as one family. I learned early on the meaning of faith, discipline, and dedication. The mosque was like an extension of our home, and each prayer was an intimate conversation with Allah. I have always felt a quiet pride in being Muslim. My hijab was never a burden. It was a daily reminder of my identity, of my connection to something bigger than myself. I never questioned my beliefs. On the contrary, they always gave me answers. From a young age, I felt my path was clear: to live with purpose, honor my faith, and pass those values on to my children. When I was young, I had a dream that seemed distant, almost untouchable: to perform the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. I remembered hearing stories from older family members who had gone, their voices always trembling with emotion as they described the experience. It seemed like something reserved for those who had already lived a long time, who had saved years of money. Then, in 2019, something extraordinary happened. Ahmed and I were chosen in the Hajj lottery. I could hardly believe it. My eyes filled with tears, and my heart pounded, as if I knew something sacred was coming. After years of praying, dreaming, and waiting, this was the moment. The preparation was intense, not only because of the logistical demands, vaccinations, documentation, studying the rituals, but because of what it awakened in me. Each step was loaded with meaning. Each reading about the rituals, each prayer we repeated at home, connected me even more with the essence of what it means to be a servant of Allah. It was not just a trip. It was a chance for renewal, for spiritual cleansing, for reconciliation with myself. I talked to my children about the meaning of Hajj, and I felt their joy reflect what I felt inside, an enormous love for something greater than all of us. Then the day of departure arrived. I still remember the smell of the open suitcase, the neatly folded clothes, the white hijab I had chosen especially for this occasion. At the airport, there was a mixture of reverent silence and restrained emotion. During the flight, even though I was tired, my heart would not rest. I looked out the window and thought, I am going to meet the heart of my faith. When we landed on Saudi soil, I felt a gentle weight come over me. It wasn't a burden, it was awe. Arriving in Mecca was like entering another world. The streets, even though crowded, seemed to whisper prayers. The heat was intense, but there was something stronger than the heat, the spiritual energy that hung in the air. And then, finally, I saw the Kaaba. Nothing could have prepared me for that moment. No photo, no video, no description could do justice to what I felt. The sight of the Kaaba, black, imposing, surrounded by a multitude of worshippers, took my breath away. The tears came without warning, heavy, hot, carrying years of supplication, gratitude, and hope. Standing there before the most sacred symbol of Islam, I felt my soul sink. It was as if the entire universe had fallen silent, as if Allah were present in every breath I took. I was there, on the same ground where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had walked, prayed, cried, in the same space where millions of hearts, just like mine, had given themselves body and soul. It was the most profound and true moment of my life. The first few days of the Hajj were like living inside a living prayer, where every breath felt like an act of devotion. We would wake before the sun even rose, the call to prayer echoing off the walls of our simple accommodation. The morning air was dry, but charged with something sacred. With every step I took through the streets crowded with pilgrims, I felt as if I were being carried along by a tide of faith, an ocean of souls seeking redemption. The moment I walked around the Kaaba for the first time, performing tawaf, was like a waking dream. The ceaseless flow of moving bodies, the sound of whispered prayers, the closed eyes of so many around me. Everything enveloped me in an aura of complete surrender. My feet ached, yes, but my heart had never felt so light. There was a power there, invisible but palpable. The Kaaba, at the center of it all, seemed to pulse, as if it were alive, as if every brick there carried centuries of faith and tears. I felt as if I were floating, not because it was easy, but because I was finally exactly where my spirit had always wanted to be. In the early days, I barely thought of myself as an individual. I was part of something much larger, a tiny piece in a divine tapestry. It didn't matter where we came from, what languages we spoke, what our background was. Here, we were all equal. We were all standing before Allah with the same supplications in our hearts. And that, in itself, was profoundly liberating. But nothing would prepare me for what was to come on the second day. It was the day of the stoning of the Jamarat, one of the most intense rituals of the Hajj. We were heading to the bridge where 3 pillars symbolized the temptations that the Prophet Ibrahim faced. Throwing the stones was not just a symbolic gesture. It was, for me, an intimate battle. Each stone represented something I needed to let go of: doubts, hurts, fears that I had kept silent for years. The path there was full of voices and emotions. Cries of prayers mingled with the cries of people, desperate pleas echoing between the walls. It was chaotic, yes, but it was also intensely spiritual. We were all packed together, walking slowly, and I could feel my heart racing. The sun was burning brightly, and the air seemed thicker with each step. I held my pebbles tightly, praying softly, focusing my mind on what this moment meant. But then, something changed. The crowd, which had been moving as a unified stream, began to become unpredictable. Shoving came from all sides, shouting grew louder, and harmony gave way to tumult. Within seconds, I found myself surrounded, pressed by bodies that moved without control. I tried to breathe, but it was as if the air had disappeared. My hands lost the stones, and my feet barely touched the ground. I tried to resist, but the human tide was relentless. Everything was spinning. My prayers turned into pleas for help. I tried to scream, but my voice would not come out. And then, the fall came. Slow, inevitable, as if time had slowed down. I saw the sky before everything went dark. I don't know how long I was unconscious. All I remember is darkness, but it wasn't the kind of darkness that frightens. It was a silent, welcoming darkness, like the inside of a cocoon. I felt no pain, no fear. It was as if my body had been left behind and only my essence remained. I floated, not knowing where to, just enveloped by a sense of peace so intense that I wondered if I had died. There was no time. There was no space. Only a presence. Something larger than me, all-encompassing and inexplicably familiar. And then, he appeared. At first it was just a soft light, like sunlight filtering through a cloud. But as it grew closer, I could see the silhouette of a man, serene, radiant, with a countenance that was both firm and gentle. When his eyes met mine, I knew. It was Jesus. I didn't need words. It was as if my soul recognized him from an ancient memory, from a place deep within me that had always known he existed. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, and in that look, there was total understanding, as if he saw every thought, every fear, every hope I had ever had. And then he said, in a voice that was felt more than heard, "Do you see what has been done in my name?" The words hung in the air, heavy and sweet at the same time. I wanted to respond, wanted to say that yes, I saw, or at least that I was beginning to understand. But before I could form a thought, the environment around us began to change. The still light gave way to vivid, almost tangible images that began to appear before me, as if I were being transported to a new place, a new time. What I saw next was no dream, no ordinary vision. It was something beyond. And that's where another part of this journey begins, which I still wonder about today. Was it a revelation? Was it a sign? But I knew, with a certainty that needed no proof, that nothing would be the same after that moment. What I saw next will remain etched in my memory like an open wound, impossible to forget, impossible to explain in ordinary words. The Kaaba stood before me, but it was not the same one I had circled with reverence just days before. The sacred structure that had symbolized purity, unshakable faith, the center of everything I believed in, was now burning. Fire consumed its black walls, the flames dancing as if in mockery of everything I held as absolute. I was paralyzed. The smoke was thick, dark as ink, spilling across the sky, blotting out the sun, choking even the air. It was a grotesque, unthinkable sight, and yet here I was, seeing with my own eyes what my heart could not accept. I felt a scream rip from my throat. "No, this cannot be. This is the house of Allah." My voice sounded weak, crushed by the roar of the fire. Horror gripped me, a deep pain that suffocated me. It was as if everything inside me was falling apart. Jesus was still standing beside me, but now his face had changed. The sweetness that had once emanated from his eyes gave way to a grim sadness, almost a silent lament. He looked at the burning Kaaba, then back at me. There was a heaviness in his gaze, a knowledge that I had not grasped. "What do you think happened to your faith?" he asked. The words hit my chest like a dry thunderclap. I cringed, as if I could run away from them. How could anyone ask me that question? I, who had never strayed from my faith. I, who prayed 5 times a day, who fasted during the month of Ramadan, who taught my children to love Allah above all else. I wore the hijab with pride. I had performed the Hajj. How could my faith be burned? I felt my convictions shake. Before I could stammer out any response, he spoke again. "The truth is not always what you expect. There is more to what you know. There is more to what you believe." These words echoed like silent thunder in the space around us. And then, suddenly, everything fell apart. The image of the Kaaba in flames, the glow of Jesus' presence, the light, the smoke, everything dissolved in a second. I was alone again, enveloped in darkness. A total void. No time, no form, just silence. And within it, his words still vibrating within me. I woke up with a start. My eyes flew open as if they had been wrenched from sleep. The chaotic sound of the moving crowd still filled the air. I was still in Mina. The scorching heat of the desert pressed against my skin as if the world itself were melting around me. My chest heaved. Dust seeped into my lungs. I was alive, but it wasn't the same. I looked around, disoriented. People were running past. Others were praying silently. Some were crying. Life went on, but inside me, everything was on hold. I sat down on the edge of the makeshift sidewalk, trying to understand if I had fainted, if it had all been a hallucination caused by the heat, the fatigue, the weight of the intense days of the Hajj. But deep down, I knew. I knew that it had been real, not with my physical eyes, but with my soul. I stood up slowly, unsteadily. My legs were wobbly, but my heart was pounding harder than ever, not with faith, but with confusion. The firmness I had always felt in my belief had cracked, like an ancient cup, which still shines on the outside, but begins to bite on the inside. I tried to focus on the rituals that were still to come, but my body seemed to act on instinct, while my mind spiraled. Every step I took felt like a farewell to who I had been up until then. Jesus' words echoed without ceasing. "There is more to what you believe." What did this mean? That there were other truths? That the faith that had shaped me, that had guided me since childhood, was not the whole but only a part? It was an impossible thought, and yet inevitable. I tried to hold on to prayer. I tried to repeat verses from the Quran, seeking the familiar comfort of the words that had always brought me peace. But peace did not come. The sound of the words was the same, but the meaning seemed distant, as if echoing from a previous life. At that moment, amidst the dust and heat, surrounded by thousands of pilgrims continuing their journey of faith, I felt alone like never before. And that's when I understood, even in the center of faith, it is possible to get lost. When I finally made it back to the tent, my body felt like it was completely collapsing. Exhaustion hit me like an avalanche. My muscles ached, my skin throbbed from the sun, but nothing compared to the crushing weight of my mind. I entered the tent in silence, as if I had lost my mind, and sank down onto the dusty ground. Around me, the other women were chatting animatedly, some laughing, others sharing stories about what they had experienced that day. The once welcoming sound now seemed distant, almost irrelevant, as if I were watching a play I was no longer a part of. "What happened, Mariam?" asked one of them, a kind woman from our group with whom I had shared several conversations in the previous days. She leaned in, looking at me with concern. "You look so pale. Are you feeling okay?" I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell, but my throat closed up and no words came out. How could I explain? How could I say, there in that sacred space, that I had seen Jesus, that the Kaaba, the most sacred place of my faith, had been transformed into an apocalyptic vision of destruction before my eyes? How could I confess that, from that moment on, everything I had known seemed to have become fragile, almost illusory? I just shook my head lightly and looked down, just a little tired. It was a lie, and I knew it, but it was the most I could offer. I sat on the floor of the tent, my hands shaking slightly, pressed tightly against my knees. My heart seemed lost in an irregular rhythm, and the feeling of loneliness, even surrounded by so many people, was overwhelming. I felt broken, inside, silent. That night, when everyone was asleep, I wrapped myself in my thin blanket and turned onto my side, staring into the darkness of the tent canvas. The muffled sound of footsteps and murmurs from the camp still echoed, but what really resonated was my own confusion. I closed my eyes and prayed desperately. The words came with difficulty, as if something inside me was in conflict. "Allah, please, speak to me. Show me what this is. Don't abandon me." But even as I recited the prayers I had known since I was a child, I felt something had changed. The words were there. I said them, my voice cracking and my heart breaking, but their meaning seemed hollow, as if they were floating between me and the sky, reaching nowhere. I felt an emptiness gnawing at me, like a hunger I couldn't name. It was more than doubt. It was an absence. The next day, I dragged myself to the mosque. My body still felt like a dead weight, but it was as if my soul was demanding some attempt to reconnect. The air was filled with the familiar smell of slowly burning incense, and the voices of the worshippers rose in a sweet, steady murmur. For a moment, I tried to let myself be enveloped by that sound, by that place that had so often soothed me in the past. I knelt on the cold marble floor, pressing my forehead to the ground with the same reverence as always. But as I began to recite the verses of the Quran, something inside me snapped. The words came out, but they seemed to come from someone else. I knew them by heart. They had been engraved in me since childhood, but now they sounded distant, almost foreign. My mind returned as if hypnotized to the image of Jesus, his gaze, the serene intensity of his presence, the pain mixed with love that I felt in his voice, and the Kaaba, engulfed in flames, like a symbol of that which I would never have imagined questioning. The truth is not always what you expect. These words echoed in the depths of my soul, even as my mouth continued to recite the verses I had learned. It was unbearable. I wanted everything to go back to the way it was before, clear, safe, sacred. But this desire clashed with a reality I could no longer ignore. In the days that followed, I continued to perform the rituals of Hajj. My hands moved, my body bowed, but my mind was far away. Every action seemed mechanical, and worst of all, I felt ashamed. Ashamed that I couldn't reconnect. Ashamed that I couldn't tell anyone. Ashamed that I carried such immense doubt in the midst of what should have been the culmination of my faith. When the day came to leave, my eyes filled with tears, but not from longing or gratitude. It was mourning for a part of me that had died there. The plane took off at dusk, and I watched Mecca disappear beneath the clouds with a lump in my throat. The holy city had been the scene of the greatest miracle and the greatest crisis of my life. Ahmed and the kids were at the Houston airport when I landed. Layla ran up to me with a big smile, her arms outstretched. Adam followed close behind, shouting, "Mommy!" with the pure joy that only a child can. Ahmed hugged me tightly, his eyes brimming with tears. He cupped my face in his hands, relieved. "Thank God you are okay." I forced a smile. My arms hugged them back, but inside, I was still trapped there, in the crowd, in the vision, in the silence. I wanted to be there, with them, but part of me was still in the void. On the way home, the world seemed the same streets, the same sounds, but inside me, everything had changed. I tried to convince myself that I could go back to my routine, that all I had to do was rest, pray more, forget, but it wasn't that simple. The vision wouldn't let me go. It wasn't just any dream. It was an open wound that throbbed, calling me to look deeper, to face truths I wasn't ready to see. And deep down, I knew the Hajj was over, but my real journey, the one no one saw, was just beginning. That night, as I lay in bed, my body still beneath the covers, I squeezed my eyes shut and began to pray once more. But it wasn't a quiet, ritualistic prayer like the ones I'd prayed before. It was a raw plea, almost a silent scream coming from deep within me. I was in despair, calling out to Allah, begging for guidance, for answers. My inner voice was shaking. Lord, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm lost. Please show me. Guide me. Help me understand what I saw. Why did you show me that? I waited. I waited like a child waits for its mother's hand in the dark. But nothing came. No answer, no sign. Just a crushing silence, an emptiness that seemed to stretch infinitely inside me, as if I were facing a deep, dark ocean, with no bridge, no boat, no shore. I felt afraid. For the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't know who I belonged to, not even myself. The days passed like chains. The following weeks were gray, colorless, shapeless. I went about my daily tasks like a machine, making breakfast for the kids, taking Layla to school, helping Adam with his toys, smiling at Ahmed, pretending everything was normal. But inside, there was a crack, and it was growing wider by the day. Talking to friends became exhausting. Attending community meetings was nearly impossible. The Arabic words that had once flowed from my mouth like songs now felt heavy, hard, lifeless. Prayers at the mosque became suffocating. I felt like I was drifting away, not just from my religious practice, but from the world I belonged to. And that drifting away hurt more than anything I had ever felt before. Then, on a warm, quiet afternoon, I found myself alone in the living room, sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the opposite wall. The children were with Ahmed in the backyard. The muffled sound of their laughter seemed distant, almost from another planet. Inside me, everything was still, as if something had broken. I was exhausted. I didn't know who I was anymore. Then I slowly stood up and walked over to the bookshelf. My fingers hesitated, hovering over the books. And almost without thinking, I pulled out the Bible. It was an old copy, one I had received at school when I was a child, but had never really read. I had always considered it a symbol of another faith, a faith that was not my own. Just touching it felt heavy in my chest, as if I were betraying something sacred. But that day, something inside me whispered, Leia. I sat with the book on my lap, my hands shaking. I opened it slowly, the pages feeling rough under my fingers. It was strange and yet incredibly familiar, like visiting the home of someone you don't know, but where everything seems to have been made just for you. I began reading the Gospels, cautiously, with one foot in and the other out. But over time, reading ceased to be a simple act of curiosity. Jesus' words began to seep into the cracks of my soul. They did not shout. They did not impose. They did not demand. They touched. They whispered. They consoled. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Forgive, just as your heavenly Father forgives you. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. I found myself crying in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. It was as if someone was finally seeing me, truly seeing me, even when I no longer knew who it was. Jesus' words seemed to be directed not to my mind, but to my wounded heart. I wasn't just reading a book. I was being touched, shaped. Those simple phrases were reminding me of what I had felt in that vision, the look in Jesus' eyes, that love that required no explanation, the almost unbearable compassion that shone in his eyes. I closed the book for a moment and let the silence embrace me. The room was calm. The sun was beginning to set, painting the walls with golden hues. I could hear myself breathing, and deep in my soul, almost like a distant memory returning with sudden clarity, I heard his voice again, the same voice I had heard in that indescribable dimension. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I felt a chill run down my skin. Was this the way? Was this, after all, the answer I had been seeking? What if the truth was not only in the words I had learned all my life, but also here, in that book I had always feared? What if the sight of the burning Kaaba was not a punishment, but a calling, a breaking away from what was comfortable, to make room for what was eternal? I didn't know the answer. I still don't. But there, in that silent room, holding a book that had previously been foreign to me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. A soft, subtle peace, but real. a sense that maybe, just maybe, I was beginning to walk toward the truth. Not the truth shaped by fear, custom, or obligation, but the truth that frees, that heals, that loves. But the conflict within me was like a field on fire, silent on the outside, devastating on the inside. My identity as a Muslim woman was not just a part of me, Itaram. The hijab I wore every day, the verses I recited with my children before bed, the fasts during Ramadan, the Sabbaths with my community at the mosque, these were more than religious practice. They were my culture, my memory, my history, my honor. To give them up would be like ripping off one's own skin. And yet, there was something new growing inside me, something I couldn't name, but that wouldn't stop pulsing inside my chest. A desire for something more, a different love, a light. I continued reading the Gospels as if I were hiding, but also as if I were nourished. With each page, I felt my heart being touched in a way I had never felt before. Jesus' words did not ask me to bow down. They invited me to stand up. They did not demand that I belong. They welcomed me as I was. The stories of the lepers being healed, the oppressed being heard, the adulterous woman being forgiven, they all spoke to me intimately, as if they were stories written for me. The Sermon on the Mount destroyed me and remade me. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I read and cried, alone in my room, with the Bible open on my knees. The tears fell, and I didn't know if they were tears of sadness or relief, or both. I felt as if a forgotten part of me was finally waking up, but at the same time, the fear, the constant fear. What if I was deluding myself? What if this was all a test from Allah? What if, in the end, I was trading truth for emotion, betraying my faith, my family, my history? During the day, I was on autopilot. I taught classes, laughed with the students, took care of the children, pretended to sleep next to Ahmed. But at night, conflict consumed me. I began to pray more often, but my prayers changed. They were full of questions, not certainties. I would say, Lord, I seek you, but I do not find you in the same place as before. Guide me. If I am mistaken, correct me. If it is true, confirm it. Help me, please. And it was then that, for the first time since Hajj, I felt again that presence. It was subtle, like a light breeze brushing against my face, but it was real. It enveloped me like a warm wave, a gentle, deep energy. It wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion. It was peace. A sweet peace, as if everything was in the right place, even though I didn't understand anything. Along with it came a silent sadness, as if someone was feeling my pain, as if saying, I know. My mind wanted to question, could this be the spirit of Jesus? Or was it just my heart wanting comfort, inventing answers? But my spirit knew. It knew with a certainty that was not rational. It was lived. I tried to talk to Ahmed one night when the children were asleep. He saw me fidgeting and asked what was wrong. For a moment, I hesitated and almost gave up, but there was a part of me that didn't want to carry this alone anymore. Ahmed, what if there is more than what we have been taught? Have you ever felt that? Like something beyond our faith is calling? He looked at me strangely, as if staring at a crack in a solid wall. More? He laughed nervously. Mariam, what do you mean by that? More than Islam? What kind of stuff have you been reading? I had an experience at Hajj, a vision. I saw Jesus. I heard him. And since then, I can't ignore it anymore. He was silent for a moment, then shook his head. You're just tired. It was a shock, a trauma. It's not real. You've always been faithful. This isn't you. But it was the new part of me trying to be born. It was my soul crying out for answers. It was my faith being transformed, not lost. I didn't blame him. How could I? Until I didn't know what was happening to me. But one thing I knew with every fiber of my being, I could no longer ignore. The presence I encountered in that experience, the voice of Jesus, the peace I felt, the love that overflowed. All of it was more real than anything I had ever experienced. The pain of perhaps losing everything was real, but the pain of pretending nothing had changed was even greater. And there, in the middle of it all, I realized I was at a crossroads between fear and truth. And even though I was shaking, even though I was confused, even though I was heartbroken, I knew I had to keep going. I didn't know where that road would take me, but I felt with the strength of a wounded and hopeful soul that it would take me home. Vision immobilized me. The Kaaba burned before my eyes like a solemn torch. The fire did not roar violently. It danced, hypnotic, as if each flare served a deeper purpose. There was no screaming, no panic, just the soft crackle of flames and an unearthly silence that seemed to hold 1,000 meanings. Thick smoke rose into the sky, but it was not black as I had imagined. It was golden, shimmering, almost ethereal, and as it rose, I realized that the fire did not destroy. It revealed. Beneath the crumbling walls, there was something hidden beneath the stone and tradition, something that had never been seen before. It was as if the very heart of faith was being exposed. And then I understood. This was not a destruction. It was a revelation. I took a step back, my heart racing, and in the midst of the flames appeared he, the same figure from my first vision, Jesus. But this time, he wasn't walking in the light. He was in it. The light came from him. His eyes met mine, and again I felt that overwhelming presence of love. But now there was something else too. Urgency. A calling. He didn't speak with words. He didn't need to. His presence spoke directly to my spirit, without language, without noise, just pure meaning. Yet in my mind, I heard something, a soft, firm whisper, like a truth I already knew but could only now accept. Everything that can be shaken will be shaken, so that only what is eternal remains. My body shivered. The words didn't come from outside, but from within, as if my soul recognized them, as if they were seeds planted long ago, now blossoming amidst the chaos. He held out his hand to me. I couldn't physically touch it, but I felt that if I said yes, something inside me would change forever. I stood there, torn between two worlds, the fire of tradition and the light of revelation, the safety of the known and the call of the eternal. And for the first time, I knew, not with my mind, but with my spirit. I said yes, not out loud, but with everything I was, with my pain, my fear, my love, my confusion, with my heart in pieces and my soul on fire. I said yes, and in that instant, everything disappeared. The Kaaba, the fire, the light. I was enveloped in a serene darkness, like a veil gently falling. But it was not empty. It was full, filled with something sacred and silent. It was as if God, the God I had always known, was now showing me a new face, not a contradiction, but a complement, not an enemy of my old faith, but the fullness of it. I woke up with tears on my face, but this time, they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of acceptance. Something inside me had given in. I got out of bed, still shaking, and went to the mirror. I looked at myself with different eyes. There I was, Mariam al-Farsi, born into Islam, shaped by a rich faith, but now called to something beyond. I was still me, but not the same. This time, I didn't cry for who I had been. I cried for who I was becoming. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew there would be rejection, pain, even persecution. But I also knew, I knew deeply, that the love calling me was greater than any fear. The journey didn't end there. She had, in fact, just begun. At that moment, a soft voice, yet filled with mysterious power, called me by name. Mariam, this is what you need to understand. Those words seemed to pierce my very being, echoing with a clarity that surpassed anything I had ever heard. The truth you seek is not confined to the limits of the world you know. The time of idols has come to an end. Now is the time for your faith to transform, to evolve into something greater. My heart began to beat faster, almost as if it would leap out of my chest. The sight before my eyes was so vivid that it seemed to freeze time. The image of the Kaaba, the sacred heart of our faith, was burning with intense flames, a flame that did not destroy but seemed to cleanse, purify. The fire did not bring fear, but a strange sense of renewal, a clear message. The old ways were no longer enough to sustain what I believed to be the truth. It was as if the very soul of my faith was being put to the test, invited to reinvent itself. And then, in the midst of that fiery dance, I saw him, Jesus. He was there, present, alive, unlike any representation I had ever seen in pictures, statues, or stories told. He was not just a distant character in history. He was love itself in human form, radiating grace, peace, and an authority that did not need to be proclaimed aloud. When his eyes met mine, I felt an overwhelming wave of serenity invade my entire being. His smile was soft, but filled with a compassion so deep, that it broke down every barrier I had erected to protect myself. He didn't speak with words at that first moment, but his message was clear, pulsing through every fiber of my being. He was there to show the way, to reveal a truth I had not yet fully understood. The Kaaba, which had always been a sacred symbol to me, was burning, but not as a punishment. It was a powerful sign, the end of a cycle, and the beginning of a new, greater journey. "Do not be afraid, Mariam," her voice echoed within me, steady and calm, filling every corner of my soul. "The old is fading away. You are being called to something beyond what you have known. Do not cling to the shadows of the past. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Come, follow me, and you will find peace." I fell to my knees, my hands shaking, reaching out to him, even though I knew I couldn't touch him. Still, his presence seemed to envelop me like an invisible embrace. The love he emanated was pure, intense, and swept away any doubt or fear that might still be lingering within me. It was as if everything I believed, everything I had experienced, my struggles, my certainties and uncertainties, had converged in that moment of clarity. The truth I had been searching for had finally reached me, but the vision didn't stop there. It expanded, showing scenes that seemed to come straight out of a dream. I saw crowds of people wandering in the darkness, lost and confused, groping in the void, desperately searching for something to hold on to. And among them, I saw myself, lost, alone, but now guided by the gentle light emanating from Jesus, moving toward that love that illuminated everything around. Then the scene changed once more. Now I stood before a great throne, where Jesus sat. His gaze swept the crowd, not with harsh judgment, but with profound mercy. There was a justice tempered with grace, a love that transcended anything I could imagine. But along with this light, I felt a silent, dark warning. A choice had to be made. There were different paths before the people. Some led to the light, others plunged into darkness. It was as if that vision was telling me that the moment of decision had arrived, and there would be no turning back. Following Jesus, accepting that truth, would mean transforming everything. My life, my faith, my essence. Deep in my heart, I felt an irresistible pull, a profound certainty that I could no longer ignore. Despite the fear that gripped my chest, a serene peace and profound understanding enveloped me. I knew in that instant which path I should follow. The flames that consumed the Kaaba did not burn me. Indeed, they seemed to purify me. I felt a different fire, a fire that melted away the old weight I had been carrying, all the beliefs that had shaped my life up until that point, beginning to dissolve like smoke in the wind. The idols, the structures that had once seemed sacred and unshakable, lost their power in the face of this flame that pierced through time and soul. There was something beyond them, something greater than anything I had ever known. It was then that I heard her voice, soft and steady, like a breeze dancing through the leaves, whispering in my heart, "Go, Mariam, go and spread this message. Do not fear what others may think, nor the rejection that may come. The truth you carry has the power to set us free." As the vision slowly faded, the fire in my chest did not diminish. Indeed, it seemed to grow, fueled by a love that could not fit inside me, a vast, profound love, a love that Jesus had left in my spirit. It was a love that surpassed all human logic, that called me to leave behind the comfort of the familiar and embrace a renewed life, a new and challenging path. The next day, I sat alone, silence filling the room as my thoughts swirled restlessly. My heart felt divided, torn between the reverence I had always felt for the Kaaba, that sacred symbol of my faith and prayer, and the message the vision had given me. Seeing the Kaaba in flames was not a sign of doom but of transformation, of a cycle ending to make way for something new. Jesus' words echoed within me with overwhelming force. The old is passing away. I knew I could no longer run away from that reality, but how could I reconcile this new truth with everything I had been taught since I was little? How could I reconcile this flame that burned inside me with the life I knew? My identity as a Muslim woman living amid the diversity of the United States. My faith, which had once been clear and firm as a rock, now felt like shaky ground, and I felt like I was on the edge of an abyss, ready to jump without knowing what awaited me on the other side. In my day-to-day life, I continued to live as before, but everything was different. At the law office, at coffee meetings with friends, at family gatherings, I was a visitor in my own life, passing through a world that felt both familiar and strange. Conversations carried an invisible weight, as if I were carrying a secret I could not reveal. At the dinner table, I listened to my family's words with new attention, searching their eyes for any sign that they might see what I had seen. But there was nothing but their unwavering devotion to the faith that sustained us, the reverence for the Kaaba, the honor of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It was painful to imagine how they would react if they knew of my vision, of my encounter with Jesus, of the love I had felt flowing through that presence. How could I explain that the symbol I had always considered the most sacred now seemed like a bridge to an even greater truth, a truth that transcended the faith in which I had been raised? How could I share with them that my soul was awakening to a calling they might never understand? In the midst of all this turmoil, there was an inner flame that would not go out, the certainty that what I had found was not just for me. The love Jesus offered me was universal, free from the barriers of religion, origin, or past. He did not come to judge or condemn, but to open paths, to free me from the weight of the past, and guide me to a new way of seeing the world and myself. Still, knowing all this didn't make the journey any easier. What I felt was a mixture of fear, hope, and a burning desire to be true to what my heart knew to be true. The journey that lay before me was scary, uncertain, but for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be, at the beginning of a transformation that would change everything. The truth I had discovered was like a sharp blade, cutting in two directions. On one side, it brought profound peace, a clarity that illuminated even the darkest corners of my soul, and the promise of an eternal life beyond this world. But on the other side, that same truth threatened to shatter everything I knew, everything I loved, my family, my friends, my entire community. I knew I risked rejection, scorn, and possibly complete abandonment from the people who had for so long been my safe haven. It wasn't just the fear of losing my family that paralyzed me. It was the thought of being torn from the community that had raised me, from the social fabric that had enfolded me. In the United States, where we were already a minority, the Muslim community had always been my rock, a place where we had gathered in prayer, celebrated together, and found strength to face the outside world. But now, I felt out of place, alienated, an outsider among them. Could I ever be the same again? Or had that path already been closed to me? For days I lost myself in silent prayer, searching for signs, a signal that would confirm the path. But the silence of my heart only increased the torment. I was torn between two worlds, the known world, with its rituals and certainties, and the truth that was unfolding within me, burning and irresistible. A part of me longed for the comfort of the familiar, for the prayers that would calm my mind and soul. But another part, the part that had seen the Kaaba consumed by fire and felt the living presence of Jesus, called me to go beyond, to break through the barriers I had built around my own heart. It was a conflict so intense that it seemed to tear me apart. As I sat in front of the mirror, I asked myself, my voice trembling with doubt, who was I now? What did it mean to be Muslim after experiencing something so profound and life-changing? Did I still belong to the faith that had taught me life? Or had I been called to a completely new path? Deep down, I knew that something inside me had changed forever. That vision had not been just a passing dream. It had reshaped the core of my being. I had always thought that faith was about obedience and submission, faithfully following the Quran, living by the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But now I began to realize that faith was much more than that. Faith was love. It was a deep, personal relationship with God. And in that moment, a certainty dawned on me. Jesus, who had shown me such complete and overwhelming love, was the way, the truth, and the life. But the world around me was not ready to hear this. My family, my community, were anchored in beliefs and traditions that I was beginning to see in a new light. They would never understand my experience, and they certainly would not accept me if I told them about my encounter with Jesus, about the love that called me out of what I had always known. The thought of opening my heart to them filled me with dread. The prospect of losing everything that defined me, my family, my friends, my identity, seemed almost unbearable. Yet, despite the fear gripping my chest, I knew I could not give up on this truth. The Burning Kaaba was not a curse, but a powerful call. It was time to evolve, to abandon old ways, and to follow the light that Christ offered. I felt the weight of this decision like an immense burden, the responsibility of carrying this message even though I knew it could cost me everything. In the quietest moments, when the world seemed distant, I still felt the presence of Jesus with me, a love so gentle and yet so firm at the same time. His whisper seemed to pierce the shadows of my fear, saying, "Do not be afraid, Mariam. I am with you, even in the darkness." And so, with my heart torn between fear and hope, I prepared to walk into the unknown, a path that I knew would change everything, forever. And then, with that gentle but firm whisper pulsing deep in my heart, I made a decision that would change everything. I knew I was about to embark on a winding path, a lonely journey that would take me away from everything I had ever known and loved. But despite the fear and uncertainty, there was promise along that road, the promise of true peace, profound clarity, and a divine love that surpassed all understanding. I would choose to follow Jesus, but I wasn't fooled. I could already feel the weight of what was to come, the isolation, the judgmental gaze, the pain of rejection. These shadows were closing in, fast and relentless, yet something inside me remained inexplicably calm, a serene peace that didn't fit with the chaos around me. I knew, in some inexplicable way, that I was no longer alone on this journey. The weeks that followed were an emotional whirlwind. The weight of my choice silently crushed me. I knew that the time was coming to face the people who had known me all my life, those who would unwittingly be hurt by the radical transformation I was undergoing. I had always prided myself on being a good daughter, a devoted sister, a faithful friend. The thought of betraying those bonds, of disappointing those who loved me, was an almost unbearable pain. But the force pulling me toward Jesus was greater than any fear I had ever known. I decided to start with my mother, the beating heart of our family. She had guided me with so much love and dedication on the path of Islam, taught me the prayers, taken me to the Hajj when I was just a little girl, and shown me the beauty of the sacred rites and the connection with God. How could I tell her that I had found something, someone, who would change everything? We sat together in the small living room, the steady, familiar sound of the refrigerator humming in the background, the comforting scent of tea filling the cool afternoon air. She looked at me with those eyes full of warmth and expectation, trusting that I was on the right path, the path Allah had laid out for me. But in that look, I sensed something different, a subtle uneasiness, a sense of foreboding. "Mariam, you've been so distant lately. What's going on?" Her voice was shaking, full of motherly concern. My chest tightened, and the words I had rehearsed countless times seemed to slip from my hands. Trapped, unable to break free. How could I explain something so profound, so foreign to her? Something that defied everything we knew? My mother, a woman whose faith was woven into every fiber of her being, a devout follower of the Quran, and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, would not understand. I could see that clearly. "I had a vision, Mother." My voice came out barely above a whisper, as fragile as the hope that she would understand me. A vision that changed everything. She frowned, leaning forward, as if trying to capture every nuance of my soul. Her eyes, once serene, now shone with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "What kind of vision, daughter?" "I saw the Kaaba, but it was on fire," I said, feeling my own heart race as I revealed what had just seemed impossible to share. "I saw Jesus, and he showed me the truth." The silence that followed was like a wall between us, heavy and crushing. My mother's face was a mask of disbelief. Her lips parted, perhaps to say something, but the words wouldn't come. I had never seen such a sharp, painful look in her eyes, and deep down, I knew that the pain was as deep as my own. "Mariam, what are you saying?" Her voice shook, filled with confusion and fear. "Jesus, you have always been a good Muslim, my daughter. Where does this come from? This is not true. It cannot be. It is a lie." "I don't believe it's a lie, Mother," I said, my voice trembling, almost choked by the emotion that was taking over me. "I know what I saw. I know what I felt. That love, that peace, that truth. They were real." Her eyes filled with tears, and the sadness I saw there seemed to tear at my soul. "But you are my daughter," she whispered, her voice thick with pain. "You were raised in this faith, Mariam. Everything we did, everything I taught you, was so that you would follow the path of Islam. Please don't say such things. Don't let this vision, this illusion, drive us apart." Those words hit me like a knife in the chest. The pain in my mother's voice, that desperate plea, almost made me retreat, doubt myself. I wanted to turn back, pretend nothing had changed. But deep down, something was stronger than the fear. The love I had found, the love Jesus had shown me, wasn't just for me. It was for everyone. I couldn't just deny it. "Mom," I said, my voice cracking but determined. "I love you more than anything, but I must follow the truth that has been revealed to me. I cannot deny it. I cannot go back." Tears were streaming freely down her face now, devastation filling her expression. "Then you are lost, Mariam." Her voice broke, filled with despair. "Lost to me, to your faith, to everything we've ever believed in. I don't know who you are anymore." I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of those words like stones crushing my shoulders. "I'm still me, Mother. I'm still your daughter. But I have to walk this new path. I have no choice." With a heavy heart, I turned and walked out of the house. Each step echoed like a goodbye, a painful separation. As the door closed behind me, I felt a cruel silence settle in, as if the walls of the house were closing in, widening the chasm between us. I had lost the only anchor that held me steady, and he knew the worst was yet to come. That same night, my cell phone rang. It was my brother, Farid. His voice was cold, distant, almost sharp. "Mariam, what's wrong with you?" he asked, with a concern that sounded more like accusation. "Mom is devastated. She's inconsolable. What are you doing?" "I am following the truth," I replied, almost in a whisper. "I have seen something, Farid, something I cannot deny. I have seen Jesus, and he has shown me the way." He laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of joy. It was one of disbelief, of suppressed anger. "Jesus?" he repeated sarcastically. "Mariam, you're talking nonsense. You're betraying everything we are. You're betraying us. You're betraying Islam." "I'm not betraying anyone," I insisted. "I'm following what I believe to be the truth." "You've lost your mind," Farid said, not hiding his disdain. "You're a disgrace to the family. Don't come back here with that nonsense. Don't call us. We don't want to hear that nonsense." The call ended abruptly. I was left alone in the cold silence of my apartment, feeling my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. The isolation I had feared was no longer just a distant possibility. It was there, real, cruel, enveloping me. My family, my community, my entire world seemed to be falling apart. I felt helpless in the face of this loss. I fell to the ground, tears streaming down my face, the pain nearly suffocating me. But in the midst of that overwhelming suffering, I felt something amazing. A deep, silent, inexplicable peace. In the midst of rejection, abandonment, and fear, that peace settled inside me, like a faint light in the darkness. I knew, with all the certainty in my being, that I had made the right choice. Jesus had shown me the truth, and even though I was now separated from everything I had once loved, I felt his presence surrounding me, enveloping me with the love and peace I had always sought. Even after losing my family, a part of me knew I wasn't truly alone. There was something bigger holding me together, an unseen, steadfast love that Jesus offered me, even in the midst of the deepest pain. It was as if, despite everything, his gentle presence walked beside me, whispering that I was being called to a new life, a life unlike anything I had known before. Days passed, one after another, and the weight of my choices continued to press on my chest like a heavy anchor. The rejection of those I loved most did not heal like a superficial wound. It was an open, throbbing wound that reminded me at every moment of the price of my decision. I could no longer simply pick up the phone and talk to my mother about everyday things, those little stories that once filled our moments together with laughter and warmth. I could no longer call my brother Farid to ask for advice or joke about the difficulties of adulthood. Conversations filled with warmth and affection were replaced by a deep, almost palpable silence that seemed to fill every corner of my existence. But in the midst of this painful silence, something was beginning to change inside me. It was as if the fire I had seen consuming the Kaaba and the immense love Jesus had poured out on me in that vision had lit a new fire in my own heart. A different fire, one that burned away the old certainties, leaving only a deep hunger for something real, something that would truly fill my soul. I lost much of what I thought was my life, my dreams, my plans, but in their place was a calm, steady peace that I had never felt before. Every morning I woke up with the unmistakable feeling that the world had changed forever, not just for me, but for all of us, even if we couldn't yet see it. I spent hours reading the Bible, trying to absorb every word, every teaching, as if it were the map for the path I needed to follow. It wasn't easy. Doubt visited me at many moments, whispering painful questions. Did you really see that? Could you be mistaken? But I clung to the memory of that look of love and compassion that I found in the vision, that smile full of peace that seemed to cross time and space to reach me. Jesus had not only come with a message of love, but also with a sense of urgency. He was showing me that the old world, with its rituals, symbols, and certainties, was crumbling, that everything I had believed to be solid was not enough to sustain the life I was being called to live. What he was revealing was greater, something that transcended barriers of religion, culture, and tradition. It was a love that united hearts, a truth that crossed human boundaries, a promise of eternal life for those who accepted this call. I understood then that my journey was not only to understand Jesus better, but to take that love to the world. I could no longer keep that truth to myself. I could no longer hide what my heart had become. I needed to speak. I needed to share, even if that meant facing more rejection, more loneliness. And so, even with a heavy heart and a vulnerable soul, I moved forward, knowing that the love that guided me was greater than any fear, greater than any loss. After all I had lost, the emptiness felt overwhelming. My family, my friends, my community, they all vanished as if they had evaporated from my world. I walked in a strange silence, feeling that despite the loneliness, there was still a spark of hope that would not let me go out. And it was at that moment that I found a small Christian community near where I lived. They had nothing but open arms, welcoming hearts, and compassionate eyes. There was no judgment, no harsh words, just genuine love that made me feel like, for the first time in a long time, I could breathe without fear. I shared with them my story, my fear, the vision that had changed everything inside me. Though their shock was visible, they responded with prayer, support, and a care I had never known before, like a new family, ready to help me rebuild. One night, surrounded by these new people, I held the Bible tightly in my hands and spoke from the bottom of my heart, my voice trembling and full of emotion. I lost everything. I paused, letting the weight of those words fill the room. My family, my friends, my whole world, it's all gone. I swallowed hard as tears threatened to fall. But instead, I found something greater than I could have ever imagined. I stared at their faces, feeling the force of my own heart beating loudly. I have found the love of Jesus, and I will follow him no matter where it leads me. Tears fell, but this time they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of a hope that was beginning to blossom. I had lost so much, yes, but I had gained something infinitely more precious, the truth. And though the future was uncertain, I knew that Jesus was with me, illuminating even the darkest paths. Over the next few months, I dove headfirst into this new community. I began attending church regularly, joined Bible study groups, and soon found myself helping out with the outreach programs the church offered. Each step was a challenge, shedding the old layers of who I was. Shedding the identity I'd carried with me since I was a child wasn't easy, but over time I felt something grow inside me. Freedom. A freedom that made me whole, even though I was broken into pieces. The isolation, of course, still hurt. My family remained distant, and I understood their wounded hearts. They felt betrayed, hurt by the choices I had made. I wrote letters to my mother, to my brother, searching for a bridge that could bring us together again, but the answers never came. Still, I clung to hope, the hope that one day they would see the truth the way I had. Even if that never happened, I knew I had found peace. In Jesus, I found a renewed purpose, a love that would never leave me in darkness. One day, as I sat in that church pew, the pressure and pain of the past few months seemed to dissipate like smoke in the wind. With a light heart, I realized that my entire journey, with its losses, rejections, and doubts, had led me to a real and profound encounter with God. I was no longer a stranger to myself, no longer lost. The vision of the Burning Kaaba, which had once terrified me, now shone like a gift. It was not a curse, but a blessing in disguise, opening my eyes to a truth that goes beyond religion, tradition, and cultural barriers. An eternal and unshakable truth, the love of Jesus. And now, finally, I was free to walk with all my heart, without fear, without hesitation. My journey had been long and costly, but the reward was incalculable. I knew with every fiber of my being that the love I had found in Jesus would sustain me through any storm. And with that love, I would go forth, sharing it with the world, no matter the cost. Because in the end, that's what really mattered. The love that Jesus gave me, the love that changed my life forever.